Good afternoon to each and everyone. My name is Malangas Tricia B from BSN, major in Social Studies. So, for today's discussion, we will tackle about the volcanoes and earthquakes. So, before we go to our main topic, let us first know about our learning objectives. So, at the end of this lesson, the students will be able to first identify, understand the definition of volcanoes and earthquakes. Then the second one, which is to identify types and classification of volcanoes and earthquakes. And then the last one, which is to define causes of earthquake. So that's our learning objectives. Alright, so let us first define what is volcanoes. So when we say volcanoes, it is the mountains that opens downward to a reservoir of molten rock below the surface of the earth, unlike most mountains which are pushed up from below. Volcanoes are vents through which molten rock escapes to the earth's surface. So as we all know, volcanoes contains of a lava, a magma, molten rocks, fragments, and so on. So the question is, why is that volcanoes form? What's the reason behind why volcanoes form? It's just because of an eruption. If there's an eruption, so there is a volcanoes landforms. So that is all about the volcanoes. Alright, so next let us proceed to the classic types of volcanoes. So we have here the five classic types of volcanoes. First, which is the cinder cone volcanoes, then composite volcanoes or stratovolcanoes, shield volcanoes, volcanic dome, and Mars and tuff rings. So let us discuss this one by one. Okay. Alright, let us first discuss about what is cinder cone volcanoes. So when we say cinder cone volcanoes, these are the most common type of volcano in the world. They may look like an idealized depiction of a volcano as they are steep, conical hills that usually have a prominent crater at the top. So as you can see in the picture, it is a kind of volcanoes where it is the simplest volcanoes. Okay, so as you can see here, there is a crater top in the below of the which is the above of the volcano. So that is why there is a crater top, which is a small crater top in above, is just because of the eruption. So if there's an eruption happens and that is a very small, like a bowl, so that is what we call cinder cone volcanoes. So if you see or if experience this type of volcanoes, which is, as you can see in the picture, right, it is very simple just because of eruption. So that's what we call cinder cone volcanoes. So next we have the composite volcanoes or stratovolcanoes. So these are the large volcano or many thousand of feet or meters tall, generally composed of lava flows, pyroclastic deposits, and mud flow or lahar deposit, as well as lava domes. Composite volcanoes are active over long period, tens to hundreds of thousands of years, and erupt periodically. So when we say composite volcanoes or stratovolcanoes, it is a kind of volcanoes where it is very active because it erupts periodically. So it contains pyroclastic deposits. So when we say pyroclastic, it is a rock fragments, and of course the mud flow or lahar, which is the magma flowing in the body of the volcanoes. And then example of these volcanoes or stratovolcanoes here in the Philippines is that the Mount Mayon. So Mount Mayon located in Albay. So currently Mount Mayon is erupt, right? So that is one of the example of composite volcanoes or stratovolcanoes. So in short, it is very dangerous type of volcano. Okay. Alright, so next we have also the type of volcanoes, which is the shelved volcanoes. So these are the largest volcanoes on Earth. They do not form soaring mountains with conical peaks like composite volcanoes. Instead, they are broad volcanoes with gentle slopes and are shaped somewhat like a warrior's shield lying flat on Earth. So unlike the composite volcanoes or stratovolcanoes, it is the highest volcanoes, while these shield volcanoes, it is the largest volcano. So as you can see in the picture, right, it is like a flat shape of a volcano. So that's what we call shield volcano. So if you can experience or if you can see this type of volcano, so that's what we call shield volcanoes. So the shape of this is just like flattened in the earth. Okay, so that's the shield volcanoes. Alright, so next we have here the volcanic dome. So this type of volcano is also called lava dome. Any step-sided mound that is formed when lava reaches the Earth's surface is so viscous that it cannot flow away readily and accumulates around the vent. So as you can see here, right, the lava is inside the center of the volcanoes above. So here we have the lava. So it is called the volcanic dome just because there is no lava flowing in the body of the volcanoes. So yan yung tinatawag nating volcanic dome. So nandiyon lang siya sa center ng volcano dun sa taas. Okay, so there is a lava inside the volcanoes. So yan yung tinatawag nating volcanic dome or lava dome. Right, next we have also here the Mars and tuff rings. So these are kind or types of volcanoes which are low standing volcanoes with wide or bowl shaped craters. They commonly have a donut-like profile and may be bridged. Their low edifices consist of shallowly dipping deposits of tuff made mostly of ash and angular, non-vesicular pebble-sided pyroclastic or lapilli. So as you can see here, like it's just like a volcano where there is a donut-like profile, and then it is like a ball. The shape of this volcanoes is like a ball. So that is what we call Mars and tuff rings. So there is a tuff rings just because of the made of ashes. So as you can see here, like malalim talaga yung causes ng eruptions. So that is why napakalaking bilog or napakaling butas sa center of the volcanoes. So yan yung tinatawag nating Mars and tuff rings. So that's the types of volcanoes. Alright, so let us move on to the other types of volcanoes. So we have here the 4 other types of volcanoes. First, we have here the fissure volcanoes, then the volcanic fields, the calderas, and the super volcanoes. So let us discuss it one by one, okay? So first, let us discuss about the fissure volcanoes. So what is fissure volcanoes? So these are produced by eruptions that occur along elongated fissures versus at the central vent. Fissure eruptions occur when magma-filled dials intersect the surface. So here in fissure volcanoes, there is a magma intersect the surface. So it is not just in the inside of the volcanoes, but also in the there is a magma flowing in the body of the volcanoes. So there is a long period, or there is a long over a long time of a magma happening in these types of volcanoes. So in short, of course, it is a type of volcanoes where it is a very dangerous because it is a very hot volcanoes. So this is fissure volcanoes. Next, let us discuss about the volcanic fields. So volcanic fields are clusters of volcanoes or areas covered by volcanic rocks. Monogenetic volcanic faults consist mostly or exclusively of monogenetic volcanoes. These volcanoes, cinder cones, Mars, tuff rings, and erupted fissures each experience one period of activity. So when we say volcanic faults, just like for example here in the picture, this is one area only. So these areas or this kind of volcanoes, it experience a lot of type of volcanoes. So just like for example, now in a period of in a period of these volcanoes, so it erupt. Just like for example, it erupted. So these volcanoes forms in its cinder cones. Then other period time, it forms again a maff or tuff rings. Then another period of time, it erupt na naman. Then nagpo-form na naman ito ng erupted fissures. So ito yung tinatawag nating volcanic fields. It's just because they all experience all the types of volcanoes. So it experience a lot of forms of volcanoes. So that's what we call volcanic fields. Okay, next we have the calderas. So these are collapsed features that form during large volume eruptions. So when the underlying magma chamber is partially emptied, the ground above it subsides. So when we say calderas, as you can see here, right, there is stacking of water. So calderas occur just because of the large volume of magma. So there is eruption happens, right? So it forms. So the calderas forms. So this type of volcanoes, there is a water stacking there. So here in the Philippines, we have a lot of calderas. So just like for example Mount Lagoon, which is a very spotted mountain, right? There's a lot of travelers or climbers there who want to get there, want to experience the beautiful disaster of the Mount Lagoon. So that's one of the examples of calderas. Okay, so the last types of volcanoes, which is the supervolcanoes. So these are volcanic centers that have experienced the eruptions ranked at level 8 on volcanic explosivity index or VAI. So imagine it is a very high high level of eruptions of volcanoes. So it is called supervolcanoes. So if the measurement or the volcanic explosivity index or VAI is at level 8, so that's what we call supervolcanoes. So there is a big or there is a large eruption or a large volume eruption happens within that volcano. So that's what we call supervolcanoes. Okay, so those are the other types of volcanoes. So again, the classic types of volcanoes are the cinder cone volcanoes, composite volcanoes or stratovolcanoes, shell volcano, volcanic dome, and Mars and tuff rings. And the other types of volcanoes, which is the fissure eruptions, calderas, supervolcanoes, and the and of course the volcanic fields. So those are the other types of volcanoes. Alright, so we are done with the volcanoes. So now let us proceed to the earthquake. So when we say earthquakes, it is the violent shaking on the ground produced by the sudden movement of rock materials below the earth's surface. So as we all know, earthquakes. So we experience earthquakes, especially here in the Philippines, right? So currently, the Ilocos and the Manila experience earthquakes. So the question is that where is the earthquake occur? So here we have the two center or the focus points of earthquakes. So first is the hypocenter. So when we say hypocenter, it is the focus is point inside the earth where the earthquake state started sometime. So as you can see here in the picture, right, there is it is the earth's surface. So inside the earth's surface, that is what we call hypocenter. So um so that is usually earthquake started. Okay, that's what we call hypocenter. And then we have here also the epicenter. When we say epicenter, the focus is point on the surface of the earth directly above. So if dito is hypocenter and then sa above or kung saan yung mga tao lumalakad, so that's what we call the epicenter. So dyan nagsisimula also yung earthquakes. Okay, so that's the focus point of earthquakes. There are two ways by which we can measure the strength of an earthquake. First, the magnitude, and then the second, the intensity. When we say magnitude, it is the energy released by an earthquake at the focus. It is calculated from earthquakes recorded by an instrument called seismograph. So we can measure the magnitude by this kind of instrument, which is seismograph. So ito yung kalakasan ng lindol. So this is a magnitude. While the intensity, it is the strength of an earthquake perceived and felt by people in a certain locality. Intensity is generally higher near the epicenter. So this intensity, ito yung kalakasan ng isang lindol. So we can determine this by our movement, which is the strength of an earthquake. So these are the two ways of how we can measure the strength of an earthquake. Okay, so now let us proceed to the classification of earthquakes. So it is very important to classify the earthquakes so that we can be able to aware of about the earthquakes. Okay, so tectonic earthquakes, the volcanic earthquakes, collapse earthquakes, and then the explosion of earthquakes. So those are the classification of earthquakes. So first, let us talk about the tectonic earthquakes. So tectonic earthquakes are produced by sudden movement along faults and plate boundaries. So as you can see here in the picture, right? So if you experience or if you see there is a crack on the grounds or a movement within the ground, so that's what we call tectonic earthquakes. Okay, and then the next one, which is the volcanic earthquakes. When we say volcanic earthquakes induced by rising lava or magma beneath other volcanoes. So these volcanoes earthquakes occur when the lava or volume of the magma occurs. So by that, there is an eruption happen. So if there's an eruption happen, so there is an earthquake happens. So that's what we call volcanic earthquakes. Then the next one, we have here the collapse earthquakes. So from the word collapse, so they are sometimes referred to as mine burst. Collapse earthquakes are investigated by the pressure generated within the rocks. So this collapse rocks is just that the reason of this is there is a rock movement. So if malakas na yung lindol or malakas yung intensity ng lindol, so maybe there's an collapse happening in that society. So just as you can see here, that just like the buildings, the house, so that's what we call the collapse earthquakes. Okay, then the last one we have here, the explosion earthquakes. So when we say explosion earthquakes, these are directly related to volcanic events, and they occur with volcanic explosion. So as you can see here, diba, that is a very strong explosion. So by that, the earthquakes happen. Okay, so just like for example, the grenade, if sasabog yung granada, so it may be yung mga surroundings is move. So that's what we call explosion earthquakes. Okay, so those are the classification of earthquakes. Okay, so this time let us talk about the causes of earthquakes. So what are the reason, or what are the causes why is that there's an earthquakes? Okay, so we have here two causes. First is the circum-Pacific belt, and then the second, which is the Alpine belt. So when we say circum-Pacific belt, it is also known as Pacific Ring of Fire. So long horseshoe-shaped seismically active belt of earthquake epicenters, volcanoes, and tectonic plate boundaries that fingers the Pacific basin. So here we all know that here in Pacific Ring of Fire, it is connected over all the volcanoes, especially here in the Philippines. They are also connected with the Pacific Ring of Fire. So the reason why is that there is an earthquake is just because we are connected with the Pacific Ring of Fire. Our volcanoes, our mountains is that connected with the Pacific Ring of Fire. Our Earth's surface is that connected with the Pacific Ring of Fire. So that's the reason why we have here an earthquake. So hindi natin malalaman na oo, bukas may earthquake. So hindi natin malalaman. Unlike sa weather, we can identify, or we can the weather classified if may bagyo or wala. So unlike dito sa earthquakes, we will not hindi natin malalaman if there's an earthquake. Okay, so by the volcanoes, if that volcanoes is very active, then that is a very dangerous, is because there is an instances that there is an earthquakes or volcanic earthquakes happen. So we really need to be ready every day. Okay, so that's one of the causes of earthquakes. And then the second causes of earthquakes, what is that? The Alpine belt. So this Alpine belt is a geographic area located in the southern region of Eurasia. This area is prone to earthquake activity and is recorded as having the second highest rate of seismic activity in the world. So this Alpine belt is in the area of the southern region of Eurasia. So doon napaka prone, or napaka, like, it is a very everyday there is an earthquake happens there. So that is why there is an earthquake. It's just because of that Alpine belt. Okay, so those are the causes of the earthquakes. Okay, again, the causes of earthquake is the circum-Pacific belt and the Alpine belt. Okay, so that's all of my report. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you've learned a lot from me. Okay, so thank you and God bless you all.